Hi, I'm Peter Reinhardt, and welcome to Pizza Quest. We welcome my longtime friend today for her first appearance on Pizza Quest, Cathy Whims, chef and owner of Portland, Oregon's legendary restaurant, Nostrana. Cathy has been called in one article the unofficial doyenne of Italian cooking for the Pacific Northwest and has been nominated as a finalist for the Best Chef Pacific Northwest 6 times for a James Beard Award for her work at Nostrana, which celebrates its 20th anniversary this year, which I can hardly believe because I remember eating there when it first opened. But when I first met Cathy, she was the chef and co-owner of the celebrated fine dining restaurant Genoa, where I had a memorable tasting menu meal about 25 years ago, along with famous bread author Carol Field. We'll talk about that, in our conversation. But Genoa closed about 11 years ago and Nostrana emerged, but it's quite a different restaurant from Genoa. Welcome, Cathy, and congratulations on the recent publication of your first cookbook, The Italian Summer Kitchen. I want to hear all about the new book, which I've just received. But first, let me ask you something. 6 times James Beard nomination, but you haven't yet won. So jokingly, does this make you the Susan Lucci of the James Beard Awards?
That's been said many times, Peter, that I'm the Susan Lucci of the James Beard
I didn't just make that up. Oh.
Awards. Uh, my husband calls me that too.
Well, as they say, just getting nominated is huge, but, uh, I was at some of the James Beard Awards when you were nominated, so I think maybe the last time I saw you was probably at one of those, award ceremonies, and, but so much good has happened at Nostrana, and I wanna hear more about that and maybe just share with our viewers and listeners a little bit of your story. I didn't know until recently that you were actually from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is just up the road from where I am in Charlotte, North Carolina. I didn't know you were raised there.
That's right, Peter. I forgot that you were there because I think when we met, you were living closer to the East Coast.
Yeah, I was up in Providence for a while, and then before that in Santa Rosa. So I was moving around, but I've been here for 21 years now, and so I guess maybe the last time I was at Nostrana was right after you had opened 20 years ago. I can't believe 20 years have gone by.
I know this is our 20th anniversary. And but yes, back to Chapel Hill. I was born and raised in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, and I went to college in my hometown as well. So
You went to UNC?
I did.
Oh,
I was a
tell
Latin major.
a Latin major.
I know, my parents weren't too thrilled about that.
Yeah, I'm sure that everyone was probably saying, "What are you gonna do with that?"
I'd become a cook apparently.
No, that led you into the kid, but you were even as a kid there, you were probably working in kitchens a lot, huh?
Well, there was a really great, natural food restaurant. Remember when we called them that? Natural
Natural food, yeah.
restaurants and everything was vegetarian, and it
We
was
didn't have the term farm to table back then.
no, no, we didn't, and the name of the restaurant was Pyewacket, and ironically, it was a really great restaurant, like,
I'll bet.
people that didn't even care about vegetarian food ate there, like, it was
Yeah.
highly popular, and my first job was to be their bread baker and their pastry chef.
Ah, I had no idea. So your roots are Carolina grown, but how did you end up in the Pacific Northwest?
Well, it's kind of a long story, but, it was a good, move for me in that I moved first to San Francisco. I followed a boyfriend of mine, and he had graduated from UNC.
You know how many restaurants started that way?
I know, right? I all of them pretty much, and it's very incestuous business,
Yeah.
and I lived in San Francisco for a year, which was kind of a dream for me because it's such a wonderful food city, as I know that you know, and that was very exciting just, coming from a relatively small town, although a pretty cultured town, and then we knew a bunch of people that went to UNC that had ended up living in Portland, Oregon, and Portland was, an easy place to live back then and not very expensive, and so it seemed sort of a natural move, and I were ended up working in a tavern that was famous for beers from all over the world, but eventually I was working in the tavern one day and I got a call from the owner of Genoa restaurant where you ate with Carol Field, and they asked me to come in for an interview. And the next thing I know, I was working as the pasta cook at Genoa, which was my dream job. I had saved up money to eat there a couple of times, but it was quite expensive for, someone that was, still in their late 20s when I started, and that pretty much started my Italian food career.
But somewhere along the line, you hooked up with, like, Madeline Kamen and who was the other, great Italian, uh,
Marcella Hazan.
Chala Hazan. Yeah, yeah, so they were, like, early mentors for you, like, were they instrumental in steering you, deeper into the Italian cuisine?
I would say that, Madeline Kamen was, um she really educated me in French cuisine, and I think that a lot of people, when they start off cooking, are drawn to certain cuisines, and I usually think it's, French because it's considered, like, this top level of cuisine, and also maybe Japanese cuisine, and I was a real Francophile for a while, and I loved learning all those things, and I think it helped me in my career for sure, and I was extremely lucky to study with Madeline Kahneman because it was the pure scholarship thing. It was called the School for American Chefs.
I heard about that school,
I know,
and I understand she's a pretty tough taskmaster.
she doesn't suffer fools, I'll say that,
Was
but I'm
was that in Napa where you did that?
was what? I'm
The
sorry.
school was that school in Napa or somewhere else?
Yeah, yeah, it was at Behringer Vineyards
That's what I remember,
in
yeah.
Saint Helena. And, it was wonderful. It was a 2-week program, but with only 4 students. And I was pretty much in the very first class of
Oh,
this
wow.
American Chefs. So I learned a lot, and she's a wonderful teacher, and even if she's a hard taskmaster, she really wants you to succeed. So that was
I talked to a few other people who went through that program, and they all said, "And she made me cry."
I think she made me cry one time. The first, um The first day of class, she handed us this huge, um, loose leaf notebook, like, thick, and it was full of papers, and half of it was food chemistry or any kind of chemistry,
Wow.
and I had avoided chemistry like the plague in high school, and certainly didn't take any in college, and it was really hard, and the next day we came back, and this was a full day, like, we worked really hard into the evening. We came back and, I had my what's the town that has all the hot springs? Calistoga. I was staying above Calistoga and riding my bike to St. Helena every day, and that was like I think it was like 12 miles.
Yeah, yeah, it's straight down the highway, but
Yeah.
it's a still
I was yeah, on my bike. I have my bike shipped down there, and, she that morning of the 2nd day of class, she started drilling us on all of these, chemistry questions, and none of us had hardly touched it yet. Like,
Yeah, right.
we were still exhausted. But anyway, she was a great teacher, and I felt extremely fortunate to have studied with her.
What would you say were maybe the best and most important takeaways from being under her influence? What was her main message to you that influenced and drilled you into becoming the chef that you became?
Do you know what I think it was? Was it happened that the 200-year anniversary of the French Revolution and Bastille Day was the 2 weeks that I was there, and she made this exercise for us, and that was Madeline's favorite holiday is Bastille Day, and she she told us that we were gonna create a menu for a huge dinner that Behringer was gonna throw for a lot of illuminaries, in the wine and the food world, and probably in other areas too. And she said, "We're gonna make a menu with only ingredients that would have been available in France at the time of the French Revolution."
Oh, wow.
So that meant I know, right? It was a really great exercise. So that meant there were all these ingredients that we couldn't use because all these things that came from the so-called New World, hadn't reached France yet. So we didn't have any tomatoes,
Yeah.
couldn't have dried beans, we couldn't have corn. And it was interesting because it's the middle of the summer in, Napa Valley, and all of those things are happening. Um, but it was a wonderful exercise, and then we cooked for this huge party of Beranger luminaries, and I think that that taught me that, know the know the origin and particularly the historical origins of things, and that will give I think that gives more, what the word credit isn't enough. It makes things more substantial because you have this background of a history behind them
Uh-huh.
and shows the why of why you're cooking this dish a certain way. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, yeah, so she was in a sense the sense of connectedness to
Exactly.
the why you were doing things, and I think that's such an important lesson, and I mean, we don't think of that when we think of Madeline Cameron, we think of, the rigor of her recipes and all of this, other, the sort of the food side of things, but not the philosophical, so to speak. Of course, if she had put that manuscript in Latin, you would have probably been able to consume it that night.
Possibly. We'll see.
And then who was the other Marcella Hazan? You also worked with her?
So I was already a huge fan of Marcella Hazan, and everyone at Genoa restaurant was, and there were quite a few of her recipes that made it into our menus there
Yeah,
at
let's talk
Genoa.
about Genoa because that was an ambitious menu, especially at that time. We're talking 25 years ago, and there weren't that many high-end fine dining Italian restaurants that were doing what you were trying to do there.
So, Genoa was the special occasion in restaurant in Portland at that time. It opened in 1971, which was actually, ironically, the same year that Chez Panisse opened in
Oh, interesting.
Berkeley,
Yeah.
and we were we were we called ourselves an Italian restaurant, and we served a seven-course meal, which you enjoyed with Carol Field, and, we were great fans of Marcella Hazan, but we also had some other influence that I would say I came from Madeline Common. When I studied there, I was already working at Genoa, and all of us, had cooked our way through Julia Child, and we were cooking our way through Marcella Hazan. California cuisine was happening, of course. Wolfgang Puck, Alice Waters, Jeremiah Tower, all that had huge influence on us, and so I would say that the meals that we served at Genoa weren't strictly Italian, they were kind of a mix of everything that was going on in America right now, so refined cuisine.
But in
Ri
1971, when Genoa opened, you were just a teenager, but and when you originally started working there, you were what, like a line cook or a prep cook or something, and then you worked your way up to eventually you ended up owning the place or co-owning.
I did, well, it was my dream job, I got to work at the nicest restaurant in Portland, and I actually would never, ever have thought to apply because I hadn't gone to cooking school per
Uh-huh.
se, and the Madeline Common thing happened when I was already working at Genoa, and so
Interesting.
I was afraid, but then I had a girlfriend who I was rooming with in Portland, and she worked at the sister restaurant that former chefs and owners of Genoa went to start, and it was called the Bread and Ink Cafe, and you would like this because it was called Bread and Ink because bread they had a huge baking program, and they made actually Julia Child style baguettes. Remember that recipe? I mean,
That's
that's
how I got started in bread. It was that recipe
yeah.
that got me.
They made the best bread in Portland at the time, and then some of the owners were artists, and so the ink part referred to the artist, so it was baker owner and artist owner,
Wow.
and anyway, my girlfriend worked at that restaurant, and there was always a relationship between that and Genoa, and she heard the owners talking that, "Oh, they need a new cook at Genoa, I wonder if we know." She said, "You should call my girlfriend because she's a great cook, and she's always cooking recipes I don't know anything about hardly, and she's always throwing parties, and so I got a call out of the blue when I was working in a beer tavern,
Yeah.
come in and have an interview at Genoa. So it was really the most lucky thing that could have ever happened to me.
So how did you work your way up the ranks there?
Well, you start as a night line cook, like you said. I started cooking pasta the first day I was there, and I did that for several months, and then I graduated to remember it was 7 courses. So you started with an antipasti, then you had a soup course, and these changed every 2 weeks. Then you had pasta, and then you had a fish course. So then I became the fish cook, and I did that for several months. Then you had a choice of 3 different entrees, and eventually I worked myself up to entree cook, which was sort of the lead line position. And then eventually I learned to do pastries there, and eventually I became we called them menu chefs. This was a very counterculture restaurant. Almost everyone had gone to Reed College, and they also were a lot of artists, like and they were attracted to cooking because it was, an artistic form for them. And
It's so Portland, right? The whole story is so
was
Portland.
very Portland. It
Yeah,
could have been it very well could have been Berkeley in my
exactly.
just
Yeah.
as well. And then so we had this menu chef, system where one person was the menu chef for a 2-week period, and it was their menu, they chose that menu.
Oh,
They acted as the head chef and did all the food ordering, did all the quality control, wrote the recipes, and then that switched to another, menu chef, and there were usually 3 or 4 in rotation, and then they would go back then it was your time to do it all over again after 6 to 8 weeks.
that's a
And so
cool
I
system.
I worked my way up to that, and that was we all really cherished having that job because we got to have the artistic control over the restaurant for those 2 weeks, so, eventually, I worked my way to that, and eventually, I ended up buying the restaurant from the couple that hired me, Fred and Amelia Hard, who I just saw, 2 days ago because I got to do a signing at a really famous bookstore here in Portland called, Powell's Bookstore,
Pal's book,
and
the famous Pal's book.
I know
So they're so
my boss came to my book signing.
that's so cool. So they're still alive and they're still are they
Alive and thriving here in Portland.
awesome. Yeah, Portland is such a unique city. It's one of my favorite places in the world to go to it, but and I've seen over the last 30 some years, how it evolved and become, I think, maybe the most dynamic food city in America,
Well,
so
thank
many
you.
ways.
That's nice to hear. I mean, I do feel we are very strong in the restaurant scene.
And of course, in the pizza world,
And the pizza world.
Nathan Myhrvold put Portland on the pizza map, on the bullseye by saying it's the best pizza city in the United States, which pissed off everybody else outside of Portland.
I'm sure it did. It was quite a surprise for us here in Portland, but when, I would say when my restaurant Nostrana opened 20 years ago, and it was, an idea in my head 2 years before that, there really weren't many pizza restaurants that weren't like, famous pizza chains, and then maybe just like a pizza to go, like,
Right.
shop, that
Right,
maybe was local.
when Nostrana launched, as I recall, and I know it was much more than this, but as I recall, one of the things that they were noted for, you were doing Neapolitan pizzas, kind of the true Italian Naples style pizzas, at the same time that a Pizza Shoals was opening about then, and then there's Ken's Artisan Pizza, and there were a number of pizza places that were all doing their own unique style. Later on, Lovely's 50/50 opened, and all of a sudden, there's pizza places popping up everywhere, but you were doing probably the most, I would say at that time, the most authentic Neapolitan style, or was it?
No, I mean, I would hate to claim that I made authentic Neapolitan style, but I was the only one that was really sort of searching in that direction. Um, but it's ironic because I actually, before looking over some of the questions that, you sent me that we might talk about, I thought about what was happening at the time, and I think the only one that was really a super serious pizza place that, was open before Nostrana opened was a Pizza Shoals.
Uh-huh.
And that was the standard of great pizza in Portland, and it really still is, like, there's still Brian Spangler is
Yeah.
still making incredible pizzas, and he used to be it's called a Pizza Shoals, one, because he was from the East Coast and that Connecticut sort of a pizza
Right. Appease, yeah.
that's how you say it?
I don't know, they Beats, I think they said.
Anyway, But Shoals, Oregon is a town that's about an hour from Portland in the countryside. It's very beautiful. It's in wine country, but it's an hour away. And my husband and I were so infatuated with Brian's Pizza that we regularly drove out there, like, once a week just to have his pizza, and it was so popular that you drive out there and it could be all gone, and you
That's right, yeah.
it does this total bust thing, you wouldn't get to have pizza. In fact, I thought Brian he is such an extraordinary baker that, before he opened a Pizza Schultz, he was making Olive Mountain bread and selling it at the farmer's market, and it by far was the best bread that was happening in Portland
That's
by
how I first met Brian was when he was a baker, not a pizza maker, and then when my first pizza book came out 25 years ago, a reporter I was on tour, and the Portland reporter wanted to do the story, took me to his new pizza restaurant. I didn't even know it was his until he walked out of the kitchen, and we had already known each other, and he's telling me the whole story of a Pizza Shoals, and then recently we had him on, and he told us that basically he got kicked out of Shoal Valley because it became too popular.
Oh, I remember that too. Yeah, the neighborhood was
Yeah.
unhappy, it's a little sleepy.
You know, you're bringing too much attention to our sweet little town, so that's how he ended up in Portland, not too far from Nostrana.
Well, I even got to write an article for the slow food publication about Brian's Olive Mountain bread. I was so obsessed with it.
Yeah, he was a good baker. We were both, members of the Bread Bakers Guild of America, and that's how we met as at a guild board meeting at his house, I guess, up on the mountain there somewhere,
Yeah.
and
I visited there too.
and I said, "Well, where are you gonna do and now that you've maxed out on bread here, what's your next step?" And he says, "I don't know. I'm thinking maybe pizza, maybe barbecue, maybe pizza and barbecue." And so you just never know how these things and that's again, I think part of the charm of the whole Portland story is that anything was possible and anything could possibly happen. And
You know, I think that's so great that you say that because that really was the case. When I moved to Portland in 1979, if you had an idea and you either had like 5 to $10,000 or someone that was gonna help you,
yeah.
you could pretty much do anything here. You could buy a local newspaper. I mean, not the Oregonian, but like a Environment Week, and we know the person that did start his own newspaper, Willamette Week, and that was really what was so great about Portland. It was just kind of it was a frontier place back then, and it continues to be. I don't Unfortunately, I don't think that's is possible now in Portland as it was back then, but certainly I was lucky to buy my own restaurant. I mean, it's kinda crazy.
Yeah, imagine trying to do that now in this current climate,
Uh,
but in the meantime, all you're doing all this work, you're learning, if I'm not mistaken, you were also, connected with Nancy Silverton, inspired by some of her dessert work when she was, working maybe for Wolfgang Puck or something like that, or
yeah, exactly. We were really lucky in the fact that, Nancy's, son went to Reed College, back to the Reed College.
yeah,
Um,
the hotbed Reed is the hotbed of ferment, of creative ferment.
and she was a fan of Nostrana and would come when she was visiting her son. So we got to see her a lot, and I asked her if it was okay if I put her butterscotch budino
Oh,
on the menu, and it is on the menu with her name on it.
wow. Yeah, that is a great dessert.
I think she was flattered that that we wanted to do that, and of course, we made sure to credit her. And so there was one time early on when we opened where I, had been making the butterscotch budino, and I was the one that was doing the pastries at the time, and I'm not I lo it's fun to do pastries for me, but it's not I wouldn't say it's my very strong point even though I can do it. But, I got bored and I took the butterscotch off the menu, and boy, did my servers they had a riot. Like, they were, "What do you expect us to sell? You took the butter that's the best-selling dessert of all. How do you dare take that off? We can't make any money." I mean,
That was their paycheck right
it was a tirade. Oh my god, I was like, "Oh."
Well, it sounds good that your staff felt free to speak, truth to power.
Just so, anyway.
Well,
It's never since then, it's never left the menu.
Well, I want to talk about the new book in a second, but before I do, let's just talk a little bit more about Nostrana, which I know has spawned some other spin-offs, right? You've got an Enoteca. Is that still going? The wine bar?
Yeah, exactly. It had a very quiet period during COVID, and, but it's called Enoteca Nostrana, and it's a very sweet wine bar with a couple of private dining rooms and a little more, open in its wine list in that we're not completely restricted to Italian or Oregon wines, which Nostrana mostly is. Although there's always champagne, we insist on there always being champagne. And then just recently, Peter, starting 3 years ago, we put in a garden across the street, across the side street 14th. And we have a now we have, like, a city block of a garden,
Wow.
and it's called L'Orto Nostrana. L'Orto means garden in Italian, and we can supply the restaurant with, lots of different vegetables for specific dishes, and on the menu, we star them so that people know that they came from L'Orto, and we also have events out there. We have a little covered area and, with tables and chairs, and we're building a kitchen out there in the garden this summer with a pizza oven.
Oh, sweet.
So we're gonna be able to do pizza parties and events with every Friday we have a guest winemaker, that pours wine out there. It's actually very lovely, and we're really proud of it, and it's been really great because it was kind of an empty lot that the owners of are allowing us to use for a while, but it attracted, sadly, a lot of people just sort of camping there and
Uh,
thrashing, and some unsavory kinds of things, and it's really brought a lot to the neighborhood, and the neighbors walk by and wanna see everything and seem to say, "We're so glad you're here," and it's just a real feel-good place. Some of my employees just come to work early just so they can sit in the garden before they,
is there a coffee bar there where people
time.
could just hang out like his cafe and
Yeah, we should have yoga classes or something.
Oh, yeah. Well that must be you must have a person who runs the garden who's like the head gardener or something?
Exactly, and she was a former employee of ours, and then her main assistant also was a former employee of ours who's an artist and who has a show at Rockefeller Center right now in New York
Wow.
City.
Well, it's like full circle because if this had happened 30 years ago, that could have been you working your way up through, I'll work at the garden for a while and eventually I'm gonna own my own place. I'm gonna
It's
So,
true.
do you still have do you still have oven and shaker? Is that still going?
I am an owner in Oven and Shaker.
So that's like a
It
pizza
is
bar.
still going. It actually did relatively well during COVID when, things were shut down because it's in the, Pearl neighborhood of, Portland, and it's the most dense populated area with
Oh.
tons of condos and apartments and everything, so it was an easy place for people to go when people were, sheltering a lot more during COVID.
Are the pizzas different from the ones at Nostrana?
They are a little different. They're more playful in nature, I would say. There tends to be more ingredients, certainly not as Neapolitanly classic, and the pizza crust has to be a little bit thicker to support the, I
Toppings,
would
yeah.
say sort of heavier ingredients as opposed to really light tomato sauce and a tiny bit of cheese. But, we have an old wood burning oven that came from Milan there, and it's amazing oven, like, we would if it gets too hot, you can't cool it down, like, I remember when we opened Oven and Shaker, we were burning pizzas right and left. We had to really learn to control it because it really holds its heat in for a really long time.
So do you use a different kind of flour for those pizzas?
We started with shepherd's grain, and I think we're still using that. I think
That's a local flour, right, Northwest?
yeah, exactly. It was from Eastern, Oregon and Washington, and that's how we opened at, Oven and I mean, at Nostrana, but we also use Camas Country Mill a lot.
Yeah.
We, like, play with the flowers a little more at, Nostrana, I would say.
Let's talk a little bit more about Nostrana before we get into the book. Uh, it's not just a pizza restaurant, obviously. It's an Italian theme, but like you said, not even exclusively Italian. Talk about some of the things on the menu that people come there for.
Well, the most famous dish on the Nostrana menu is called Insalata Nostrana, and it's a radicchio version of a Caesar salad. So the dressing has anchovy and eggs and mayonnaise and white wine and
Wait, have you had that on the menu, like, from way back at the beginning?
from the beginning.
I had that dish when I was
Sure
there,
that you did, it's
yeah.
hard not to have it if you have so that's always on the menu, and that's what when someone mentions that they like Nostrana to me, they always the first thing they talk about is the ensalada Nostrana.
And isn't, Nostrana also known as the capital of the Negroni?
We are very famous for our Negronis, and there's a thing in the cocktail world called Negroni Week, and I actually believe that we pretty much started that with a Negroni cocktail that we did many years ago, many years in a row, and then
Can you describe what makes your Negroni cocktail so, so destination worthy?
well, we're really true to the history of the Negroni and how it's made, which is it's in 3 equal parts, which is gin, Campari, and, vermouth. But then we take and we do that. We always have the classic Negroni, but we also take the essential flavor profiles of those 3 ingredients and play with them, but still staying true to, the sort of the things that make Negroni interesting, the bitterness quality of the Campari, the herbal quality of the vermouth, and and we can play with the gin a little bit too. But one of my favorite things that we do is also it's actually a classic, in Italy, it's called a Negroni Sbagliato, and which means sbagliare is the verb to make a mistake in Italian, and so it means a mistaken, Negroni, and the story is that a bartender accidentally reached for a bottle of Prosecco instead of the gin, and so it makes a lighter Negroni, which I really like. I like a Negroni, but when it's warmer in weather and, like, a Negroni can really hit you over the head like a
Yeah.
martini, and so I really like it with the Prosecco, it's just much tastes much fresher, and that's my Negroni of choice,
Maybe
actually.
a cookbook. Somebody should do a cookbook on all the things that happened, the great classic dishes that started as accidents.
I know, and I was thinking about that, about my own book, because there were a couple of things that as I was traveling and talking to, chefs in Italy and butchers and I would transcribe what or try and write out how to make a recipe that I really liked. There are some mistakes in my book that wasn't the original way it hey, and one story is, I have a butcher friend in the town of San Miniato, which is only, like, 20 minutes from, Florence in Tuscany, and he takes a baguette and he fills it with a pork tenderloin, and I thought that he wrapped the pork tenderloin in pancetta and then some herbs, and then puts that inside the baguette, and then ties the thing up and then roasts the whole thing, and so you kinda have this meal in one I love it, and you can slice it and, take it on a picnic or have it for dinner, and he always has that for sale in his butcher shop, and so when I was testing the recipe, I accidentally didn't put the he puts the pancetta around the bread, but I put the pancetta around the pork tenderloin.
Ah.
Fortunately, it turns out unfortunately, I mean, it's in print, and it works that way too, but that's not actually the way that he makes it in his butcher shop.
Well, that sounds like a high-end East Coast grinder, like a
Exactly.
hot hoagie, and
Very high end, very elegant, but also true to sort of the rusticity of Italian food.
yeah, right, exactly. So now you've added your own, twist to a classic.
Yeah.
Well, the book is just beautiful. It's called The Italian Summer Kitchen: Timeless Recipes for La Dolce Vita. And also, in addition to the great recipes, this wonderful, whimsical illustrations by, who's your illustrator? Uh,
Her name is Kate Lewis,
Kate
and
Lewis, yeah.
she's amazing. She lives near Knoxville, Tennessee. We have met many, many times virtually, but I still haven't met her in person, and I hope to remedy that soon.
But she
But
certainly
I
captured the spirit, didn't she, of the book?
really they're so evocative, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
I
And
think more than a photograph, they evoke the spirit of what living in an Italian summer is like, and vacationing at the beach with your feet in the sand and eating spaghettini and clams, or hiking in the mountains with your pork tenderloin baguette
yeah,
sandwich.
right, right. And your backpack that you can pull out at any time.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, what's inspired you to make that the theme of your first book? I mean, you could have written 5 different kinds of books by now, with all the different, life experience that you've had. Why focus on summer? And this is part of a series.
I I wanted well, first, I really want people to be encouraged to cook at home, and And then I thought, what is most Americans' experience of visiting Italy, or their dream of if they could visit Italy, when they would go? And I think that they would probably go during the summer. There's so many people travel during the summer, their kids are out of school. I mean, even though for me, Italy in the summer, I don't like being that hot, ironically, from growing up in North Carolina and the most humid place.
Right.
Um, I usually travel in the spring or fall, but I think most Americans do end up in Italy, in the summer, and I think the food you eat during the summer is just so lush and rich that you don't have to do much to it, like you as we know, we all, like, slice some tomatoes and slice some mozzarella and put some basil on it and sit down and make it dinner, in the middle of the summer, and we all get excited about, you know, beautiful red bell and yellow bell peppers and eggplant and all of those things. Fish, I think that summer really screams fish to me. A
Yeah.
lot of fish recipes in the
I see that. Yeah, a lot of in the entree section, a lot of, dominated by fish, yeah.
and I wanted to make sure too that the recipes weren't so complicated that people couldn't make them easily in their own home, or even more so in their beach house or their mountain house, or where they rented an Airbnb and don't even quite know what the kitchen's gonna be like. These are recipes that for the most part you could kind of make anywhere, and you can pretty much shop for them anywhere.
Are some of these recipes dishes that you would find at Nostrana?
I would say, yeah, at least a third of them, but probably more importantly, they're recipes that I cook in my own home, and I go back to time and time again, because
Uh-huh.
I love a recipe that I always wanna eat again when it's when it's back in season the next summer, and there's quite a bit of those, and they're
I
easy to prepare.
I see that the Insalata Nostrana is in the book, so the people are go it's in the book?
It is in the book.
Yeah, well, it's in the yeah, I'm looking at the table of contents right now, and it's under the salad section. Um, and I was wondering if that pancetta wrap baguette is in the book.
It is definitely in the book.
What is it? What would it be called? I'm looking at the table of contents now. I'm trying to find it so that I can.
Pork stuffed baguette.
Yeah. Even under,
I'm looking right got my book right here.
Yeah,
Pork
the ins
tenderloin and baguette. Filetto di maiale in crosta. Maiale is pork, and the crosta is the bread crust.
so is it in the pasta breads and pizza section, or is it?
Entree section.
Oh, in the entree I was looking in the wrong
Could
section.
have been under the bread one, but I think of it more of an entree.
It could have been in the at the top of the whole list of things, like start with this, but yeah, so there's so many. I mean, the fun part about looking at even at the table of contents was I just got the book and haven't had a chance to even look at everything in it or try making anything from it. But everything looks like it's fun to make. It all looks like you're reading the menu, you read it, and you want to make and eat everything that you read.
Oh, thank you. That was the goal. because cooking it should be fun, and certainly in the summer, you don't wanna slave over the stove when you can be sitting outside relaxing and,
Yeah, right.
watching your cat wander around the yard.
How long did it take you to create this book? A lot of people who wanna do a cookbook always wanna know, just like they wanna know how to make a perfect pizza. How do you create a cookbook, and how much time did you have to put into
Well,
this all together?
I think it was maybe 2.5 years, but I was very lucky, I had a lot of help with the cookbook. I have, a good friend who also happens to be my assistant, Andrew Dupuy, who's right here with me
Oh,
right
yeah.
now
Yeah, hi,
in
Andrew, yeah.
interview. He helped quite a bit, he tested a lot of the recipes, he did all the technical stuff that I'm not good at, like, including typing, and,
Including hooking us up on Zoom.
exactly, I know, and, then I had a co-author, Danielle Santoni, who worked for many years for the, Oregonian, the paper here in Portland, and
Oh,
she interviewed me about every recipe, and she also tested the recipes and helped write them up and, wrote all the head notes after talking to me.
does her name get I don't see her name on the cover. Does her name get mentioned?
The illustrator is on the cover with me, but Danielle is credited in here inside the book,
Good,
so,
good, good.
um, and then who else helped me? Everyone helped me. People in the kitchen at Nostrana tested things that we do there and wrote up how they do them, like a lot of the sauces. Like there's an aliata, which is a garlic sauce. There's a green goddess version, Italian style of a dressing. Those, my line cooks and my head chefs helped me get all the little details right about that. Um,
And that's a big part of, doing a book is you've got to, a very nice, intro that tells a little bit of the story of, your journey, which, we won't go into in detail because people can get that in the book. But then as you're, the head notes for the recipes and the background and all these, that's what takes a lot of time for authors and writers when they're putting a book together.
So, yeah, because of all this wonderful help that way, it really wasn't a long project.
But it's also that's the place where you get to kind of acknowledge all the people that have helped and contributed to creating this. This it really has that summery feel just because the watercolor illustrations are just so they just jump off the page. So you feel like you're at the beach when you're reading it.
Oh, good. That is exactly the goal that we hoped for. Thank you, Peter.
Well, yeah, well, great work and congratulations. And so the big question is like kind of the elephant in the room is you have a busy life. You run restaurants, you're building gardens, you're doing everything all the time. When do you work on something like this?
Wow. We blocked off times during the week to work on it. Like Danielle and I would get together along with Andrew, my assistant, at least once a week and we work for a few hours together and gradually things just got done, which it does still surprise me too. But and then
And then
these were the recipes that probably for those 2 years, I was cooking at home, like, all the time to test myself and to make sure this is how I wanted them to read in the book and how I wanted them to taste. So it was kind of an ongoing thing, but it wasn't hard work because I enjoyed making all of these recipes, and I enjoyed eating them in my own home too, so
did you enjoy the writing side of it as well?
I I think it was Danielle that really helped me because she translated my words and,
Uh-huh.
words on paper, and
Yeah.
that really strong talent for that. So I think if it was me doing the writing, I it would have been a project that never ended, and it would
Then
the book it is now.
another thing that, a lot of people don't realize is that by the time you actually finish the cookbook that's done, that's probably at least a year before anyone ever sees the book because it has to go through the entire editing process and, the all the work to polish it and get it ready for publication.
Exactly.
Uh, so then for me, that was always the hardest part is waiting for the waiting for that moment, for it all uh, to come out after it's already a year down the road, maybe sometimes
And you have
3
so many
months.
books, Peter. How many books have you published?
I've done 13 or so. I
Wow.
think, yeah. some of are kind of updated reprints of some of the early ones, but yeah, I think 13 and, but it's always they never the hardest part for me always was when it was done most of the work was done, but then you couldn't really talk about it too much because it was gonna be a year before anybody would see it.
I know, that's kind of funny too that way, yeah.
But on the other hand, it gives you time to start working on the next one, so let me ask, you have a next one in mind, or are you gonna take a break?
Well, I I would hope that this book does well enough that our publisher, which is Norton, Countryman, which is subsidiary, would ask me to do Italian winter kitchen or Italian
Yeah,
fall kitchen.
exactly, it's like tailor-made for a series.
I hope so, 'cause I love all the different seasons, like, probably my favorite season of all is fall, but I love the idea of a Italian winter cookbook because there's so many interesting, hearty, wintry dishes from, like, Alto Adige and Trentino and areas, near the Alps, like Val d'Aosta, which are such interesting, kind of mountainy dishes with cow's milk cheeses and polenta and rye flour and all the things that comes from those areas. Um, Orzo, which is barley, like
Yeah.
really a different, maybe not what when we as Americans think of Italian food, what we come up with first.
Exactly. So now you live again in the Pacific Northwest. One of the things I think of in your region is, and I'm guessing fall would be it's mushroom time. You know, you guys one of the great mushroom regions in the world. Would that be a big? Would that be a big take a big footprint out of maybe the fall book or
Yeah, absolutely, mushrooms would be a big deal, and all the later summer things that keep happening through the early part of fall.
are you as passionate about mushrooms as you are about some of the other things that we've been talking about?
I love mushrooms, and it's very easy here in Oregon to go hunt for chanterelles and, porcini, Boletus edulis. I haven't had the best luck with, porcini, but I have certainly found some specimens that were really beautiful. Morel mushrooms happen here in the spring, um,
So
but
yeah, so
many
so
people
really
Portlanders go mushroom hunting as a excursion.
Yeah, it seems like a part of the way of life, of living in the Portland regions and in the nearby areas. Um, well, there's just so much. I mean, you certainly could easily, if you had the time and energy, to do a few more books. And as anyone who's done a book knows that the publisher's most important concern is not how beautiful the book is, but how many copies did it sell? Because that's how they decide whether they're going to do the next one.
I know, we'll see about that there, so
Well, we'll help, that's why we wanna talk about this one is get people, to know about the book, to buy it, to try some recipes in it, and spread the word because, you know, th this is a fun book and full of recipes that some of them will look familiar, but many of them might be like things you might not find anywhere else.
that's very nice to hear. I hope it does feel unique in that way to readers.
Do you enjoy now having studied under 2 great Italian women, mentors, do you have any sort of see that as a part of the next phase of your life as being a mentor, and training the next generation of chefs and cooks to, carry on?
Well, I think that, Peter, that being a mentor is always part of being running a restaurant, running a kitchen, and I've, over the course of the years, had many, many of my, cooks go on to start their own businesses. Some in Portland, we have a strong food cart culture. Some of them start with a food cart, and then some of them go on to, like, open brick and mortars, and we've several of those that were former, Nostrana employees.
That must give you great joy when you see something like that, when we see them
It is
launch.
really great, and particularly when it's really young people that Nostrana was, like, maybe their first cooking job. Some of them came out of, cooking schools here in Portland, and some of them not. Some of them started from scratch. Some of them are, children of former employees of mine.
Wow.
That has been even in the dining room in the front of the house. And it's been really fun to, like, watch them grow and learn about things, and mostly for me to watch them start to appreciate ingredients and to look at, like, let's take polenta for one. You can buy polenta in the grocery store that, cooks in, well, 10 minutes. You can also
Yeah.
buy polenta that takes at least 30 minutes to cook. And then there's a polenta that we were using for years and years, um, from a farm called Ayers Creek Farm that Anthony and Carol Boutard grew for us and grinded to order, and it takes 2 hours to cook.
Really?
Flavor yeah, 2 hours of cooking and stirring I mean, you don't have to stir it all the time, but and
Smarter.
my young cooks would say to me when we opened the front, "Why do we have to use this stupid polenta? Just don't you know, Kathy, that there's polenta that cooks in 10 minutes?" I said, "Like,
That
like, "Oh, but this is better polenta and it tastes better." And they would roll their eyes and like, "You crazy woman, you don't know how to run a business." And then but eventually they would come around and they would develop a taste for it. And the very same farmer, Anthony Boutard, contacted us early on at Nostrana. We cook with a lot of wood. We have a wood-burning pizza oven, we have a wood-burning grill, and it was really hard to find seasoned wood, ironically, in Oregon,
Interesting.
where, there's lots of forest,
Yeah.
um, for the restaurant. We're always struggling with our wood. And then Anthony came to me and said, "Would you like to buy some wood? I have this seasoned wood that I
Ooh.
need to sell off," and we said, "Sure." And then one of my youngest line cooks who'd never worked in a restaurant before, who also complained about the 2-hour
Yeah,
wait,
right, right.
came to me and said, "Kathy, I finally get it. Even Anthony Boutard's wood is the best wood." I was like, that was a great achievement in my mind for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
It starts off with you
Finally got it.
it starts off with you having to say to them, "Listen, grasshopper, sit at my feet and learn." And then they
That's right.
and then they come back and they go, "I got it. I finally got it. I love it."
I thought about that analogy. Thank you.
But Kathy, it's been so great catching up with you and congratulations. I'm so happy for you to have be able to come out and create this new child, this new baby of a book called The Italian Summer Kitchen: Timeless Recipes for La Dolce Vita by Cathy Whims. Those of you who are listening or watching, look for it. You can find it at probably your favorite bookstore or online. If you're in Portland, go to Pals.
But
They're
now
and go to Nostrana, just so the people who've never been there will know where to go. Can you give us the address of Nostrana?
it's, 1401 Southeast Morrison Street,
So that's in the southeast portion of Portland,
Portland.
which is well, big restaurant has become a great restaurant quadrant of the city. Uh,
Comes
and
up with our garden. Nostrana
yes,
actually means what's local and from your very own area, and, Nostrana also to an Italian means that therefore it has the taste of their own home, and it's fresher and better.
we love it. Thank you. Well, listen, I can't wait to get back out to Portland to see you again, and to eat with you. And thank you so much for sharing all this experience of flavor. You've kind of, I think, if I could say the greatest takeaway that you've learned in studying with these masters and cooking for all these years for people is that you know how to share flavor with your friends and neighbors and guests at your restaurant. So thank you all for that.
Thank you, Peter. I love it when the years pass by, but our paths still cross again
Yeah, it's
for no
wonderful,
break.
and if you ever get back to Chapel Hill, please let me know. It's not around the corner, but it's not that far from me. Do you ever come back to your
Well,
roots?
actually, I'm talking to do you know Andrea Rusing, who owns, the Durham Hotel and also a restaurant in Pittsboro, North Carolina? I'm blanking on the name
Wait
of the
wait, didn't she own, a Lantern or something like
Lantern,
Yeah,
Lantern.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, great restaurant.
Restaurant.
Yeah.
I might be doing an event with her. So
Let me know, let me
you're
know.
there.
I've got a friend who's just opening a restaurant, a Sicilian themed restaurant in Durham too. So maybe I can hook you up with him. I'll get you that info. But if you do come, let me know. We'll try to complete the circle again, yet again.
Okay, I love that. I would love to meet your Sicilian restaurant friend as well.
Wonderful. Cathy Whims, great to see you again. Great to be with you. And thank you for spending your time with us today on Pizza Quest. And thank all of you for watching and listening. We'll see you at the next episode.